Joyce yung nagtanong. Pakilista si Joyce nagtanong. Okay. Yes, Joyce.
Sir, may we know if you had any bilateral meeting?
Hindi natuloy yung ano eh. Dapat Mexico, pero nahuli yata ang pagdating. At si President Umala, pero hindi magkasundo sa schedule. Dami rin siyang kinausap eh. So, nakausap ko kanina yung Chief Executive ng Hong Kong, couple of interviews. Then we're having 3 bilaterals in Brunei. So far, no? Pero pa ako mag-i-apat.
Sir, can you give details on your meeting with the CEO of Hong Kong?
Siyempre, yung hostage crisis pinag-usapan, perspective nila versus yung perspective natin. I think nagkaroon ng clarification as to what each side has been doing, why the perception of each side is such. So we're working on di ba, to put that behind us. So I got the sense about that they really were sincere in trying to come to a solution to that incident.
Sir, are they asking for any other requests from us to put a closure on this issue?
Yung isang, meron dialogue na hinihingi pala itong mga survivors, no? And the families. And siguro kailangan rin natin ma-update on yung processes involved, no? If you remember, yung Madrigal family, the incident happened in 2005, and by 2006, na-convict na yung salarin at in-execute. No? So in our case, sabi na, they pointed out, 3 years na, nasa na ba tayo? No? Then we explained what the processes are involved, the cases that have actually been filed, and how long the court processes happen within us. No? Or in our case.
Sir, who saw the meeting?
The chief executive did. Who sought the meeting raw? The chief executive asked for the meeting. Willard, pakilista rin si Willard number 2. No?
Sir, nagkaroon ho ba ng apology doon sa meeting?
Yung we explained, and sabi, parang doon rin, para basta kaintindihan ng konti. Sabi, sa culture namin, when we apologize, then it admits that we are at fault as a country, as a government, and as a people. And we pointed out that from our perspective, there was one lone gunman responsible for this tragedy. Sabi naman nila, in their culture, they gave an example of ferry collision. And the head of the, if I remember correctly, Maritime Police, who was tasked to investigate, file the charges, etc., apologized to the community, even though he was not directly responsible. So that's your cultural practice, that's your system. But in our system, we cannot admit wrongdoing if it was not ours. But we do extend our sincerest condolences again. We express our deepest regret that it's so contrary to how we treat visitors in our country.
Sir, did the chief executive accept the regrets?
You remember, parang more or less, I think you mentioned something like we recognize that in your culture, personal fault is what you apologize for. Wala naman siyang, I guess that's the closest comment that he actually delivered in relation to your question.
Sir, may dialogue pong hinihingi. With whom po?
Binanggit ni Consul General, no? Even with just the Consul General. But perhaps we can go further than that. Baka we can ask the SOJ, for instance, to give them a briefing status of cases.
Sir, how long did the meeting last?
Yan ang hindi ko masasagot sa'yo with any authority. Not an hour, no? Probably about 20, 30 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, in relation to that, sir, earlier some Hong Kong journalists tried to question you and their accreditations were revoked because of it. Did you find their manner and line of questioning rude, as the Indonesian security said?
Well, medyo parang pasigaw. No? Tsaka medyo very aggressive yung ating Indonesian host. Medyo sabihin natin siguro nagulat rin. Parang hindi tama yung behavior.
Sir, do you agree with the response of the APEC organizers? They revoked the accreditation, and the Hong Kong Journalists Association is saying it's a way of curtailing press freedom daw po. They're now being prevented from covering the summit.
Siguro naman maski saan naman tayo pupunta, we are expected to conform to certain norms of behavior. Ngayon, kaya ginawa ba sa atin yun, bisita natin at ganun ang trato, dapat pa expected na sobra tayong hospitable na okay lang. Paano naman yung bisita natin?
Sir, good evening. Sir, doon naman sa DAP, may petition sa Supreme Court asking na i-junk yung DAP. Anong position niyo? Are you willing to scrap it for good?
So, does that mean, di ba, para may savings, meron mga, di ba, para pinaliwanag ko one of the earlier interviews. Ano ba yung DAP? May budget. The budget meron makakagamit on time, merong nade-delay. Pag na-delay, mas kina-continue yung appropriations maximum of 2 years. No? Tapos back to the National Treasury. So may choice ka eh. Merong mga projects na, no, inalat yung budget, yung project mo might take 2-3 years. Pag biglang may savings, we have a policy in the cabinet. We term the policy, use it or lose it. No, parang there is no reason for everybody to be delayed if there is an opportunity to accelerate that project which was approved by Congress, which they found merit with. No? And if we can accelerate the benefits that will accrue to the people, why delay it? Yeah. So why lose and go through the whole process of having it approved again in the subsequent year? So we submit na it's not that we forced any savings on anybody. No? Yung nagkataon, may time frames na yung pinagkasunduan, itong budget nyo per quarter, these are the targets that have to be reached. As 2014 budget, napaka-specific na ng outlay, plus yung expected outcomes. No? Hindi mo nagawa yan, no? Usapan matino, we give it to somebody else who's way ahead of their schedule. And thereby get to the fulfillment of whatever that project or program is at an earlier stage. So, and we submit, it is not a unilateral decision on our part. We can only fund from savings items that have already been, have been approved by Congress. We're not inventing a new budgetary line.
Pero sir, were you aware that part of the savings were coursed through lawmakers and eventually they were channeled to questionable NGOs?
Yung eventually, ang hindi ko alam na parte. Yung parte na, di ba parang may mga requests sila. Lahat naman may outstanding na requests. Okay? We can commit to saying we can apportion a small portion to you. Pagdating dyan na merong request na pending, yung we felt legitimate requests, no? Then we're withhold not to fund it. Kinayagan namin. Now, there was one document in particular that I saw. Hindi ko na muna sasabihin kung kaninong request, no? Pero umabot kasi medicines ang request, ang category sa DBM. And di ba parang talaga naman parati may pangangailangan sa medicines. Nung napunta na doon sa implementing agency, naging anti-dengue medication. Well, theoretically, medicines pa rin yun. So, I was curious, no? Kasi I talked to our doctor, no? And I asked, is there such a thing as an anti-dengue medication? Yung vaccine is still being developed for all 4 varieties, number 1. Treatment for somebody who has dengue is hydration at pag yung blood transfusion, pag bumaba yung platelet count. But there is no actual, I cleared it to the doctor. Is there anything, parang I have a headache, you take aspirin, I have a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic. Doon sa dengue, there's no such thing as anti-dengue medication. So, I questioned, sabi ko, ano ba dito parte ang alam natin, no, from DBM for instance? At ano ba yung pagdating doon sa implementing agency? Kailan ba nireport tong anti-dengue medication? Bakit wala nakahuli nito? Bakit wala nagtanong na, is there such a thing? No? Tapos, we narrowed yung agencies that can implement. I think it's even starting from the 2010 budget to 5. Nagkaroon ng negotiations with Congress, hiningi 8. Meron mga items sa budget na alam nilang nandun pala. 2010, if you remember, no? Operational na yung 2010 budget. So, meron sila alam na pondo doon na hindi naman big in terms of the totality of the budget. Na biglang meron silang mga kausap na implementing agencies na Talaga na, sabihin natin na napagpatuloy nila yung sistemang kinaugalian nila.
Yes, sir. How did you feel about it? Did you feel insulted? Na bad trip pa kayo na tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung kalakaran?
Nasahan mo sana, pinagkatiwala mo, gawin sa maayos eh. Ano ba naman yung problema ng, di ba, dalhin sa tamang paggagamitan. Tapos yun na nga, para tanggalin yung tukso, ninaro mo yung menu. Tapos yung menu, hindi parang not as tight as I would want it. Now in hindsight, syempre everybody's best in hindsight. Talaga yung limit natin. For instance, right now, okay ako doon sa scholarships. Okay ako doon sa continuing treatment of people, di ba yung mga tipong dialysis, madami nasa orthopedic, kidney, heart center, PGH. Tapos, and all of these hospitals have developed systems to ensure na walang fictitious na patients. Okay. Tapos yung iba naman, na nagpakita na ng medyo napaka-loose na control, dapat sa puwera na yan. For instance, one of the proposals we have is no medical missions. Everything has to be coursed through a hospital. Tapos kompleto na. Baka may isang proposal pa, lagyan na natin ng biometrics. Yung pasyente will be subjected to giving his biometrics so that there's a further control.
So sir, does this mean na willing kayong i-resume yung pag-course ng government savings through PDAF sa mga lawmakers? Kasi ngayon suspended po.
I think more correct to say that there are services that are needed by our people, especially on the extreme margins of society, through no fault of theirs, is suddenly going to be removed. Hindi naman yata fair yun. How can you tell somebody who has to undergo regular dialysis treatment? Pwede mo maghintay ka lang ng ilang buwan hanggang i-sort out natin to. Pagkatid ko sa dialysis, normally weekly, certain conditions. Sometimes, several times a week. No, that can't wait. Paano na may nag-aaral? Regardless of what year you are already. Sadali postpone na muna natin ng 1 SEM, 2 SEM, hanggang ma-sort out to. Yung pag umalis sa eskwela, hirap nang bumalik eh. Yeah. So, yung potential niya to be a person with more skilled, ability to have better earnings, suddenly curtailed. Again, through no fault of this person. Hindi naman yata tama rin yan.
Sir, last na. Yun sa anti-dengue medication, how much are we talking about? Tsaka, are we talking about a senator or a House member?
Sa legislator lang, about 5 million ang naalala ko. But the 5 million might have been the totality, no? Kasi, basta what caught my attention, ako yung buong list kasi meron mga parang hindi naman on the surface pwedeng questionin. Pero tapos naipit ako doon pagdating ko sa anti-dengue medication. And I was just curious. Sabi ko, is there such a thing? No? Na you take 1 or 2 shots, you're cured of dengue. Parang hindi ka rin pagkaintindi ko sa sakit na yun. Kaya nagtanong ako.
This was savings dinaan sa DAP, not PDAF.
I'm relying on memory. I'll have to check. No? Pero it was coursed through a legislator, request of the legislator, then course through an LGU afterwards.
Sir, just going back on APEC. Sir, may we know the interventions that you made? What were the things that you pushed for during your meeting with the other leaders?
Yung more of the interventions tomorrow in connectivity. No? Yesterday we had a talk with we had that open forum with the business community. Then we had a dinner with certain business groups, no? Members of APEC. Para sa lahat naman nag-intervene kanina, more or less, ulitin ko lang yung themes na sinasabi natin. Okay? Nagkakaroon ng recovery, the global economic front, but it is not very robust yet. Pwede pa rin umatras. Meron pa rin tendency na some na baka to protect their economies, magtayuan ng barriers, which lessens economic activity further, which will further stifle the nascent reordering or improving economic conditions. Yung got to talk to, may lunch, may nakatabi mo sa mesa. For instance, I talked to Prime Minister Abe and I was congratulating him na yung projections for Japan's economy na pagkatagal-tagal niya para sa stagnation, na in-increase by 1% from 2 point something to 3 point something. Then he told me na that came from a negative 3% in the previous quarter to a positive 3%. And Japan is one of the biggest economies in the world. We who trade with them, like the Philippines, will be pulled along. Then he was saying also, but we're worried they have to implement a consumer tax they will also implement a reduction in business taxes to offset so that yung economic activity will not be stifled. So, mukha naman optimistic. We were saying na they won the Olympics, di ba? And 1964 was when they hosted, and it was the breakout party of Japan. And he said that my grandfather was the prime minister at the time. Then perhaps, hopefully, the second time around, you will also be in effect ushering the second breakout of Japan and the rebirth of the economy.
Sir, last na lang. Sir, you mentioned protectionism. It was a big issue, I understand, during the leaders' meeting. May sectors po ba tayong tinitingnan locally that might be affected kung hindi
Kasi everybody was stating na, di ba, all of this, yung TPP, yung Pacific Alliance, siyempre yung APEC, WTO, yung medyo huminto si Doha round, hindi na tayo mabante. I'm sure you've heard all of that. No? Now, siguro may common areas, no? Agriculture is a concern by everybody. And how do you improve your agriculture sector, but at the same time maintain a liberal trade policy, no? Which increases, di ba, your market, which further boosts, no, that particular sector amongst other sectors. So medyo in passing lang pinag-uusapan yung areas na baka we have difficulties here. I think one of the proposals, and it wasn't in the retreat, and I said, I think it was in the breakout session for yung ABAC. No? Perhaps we should concentrate on areas where we are very close to agreement and accelerate agreeing on that and have less that we will have to agree upon later on. Pero everybody really was trying to push for attaining yung Doha round agreements and WTO as an effective mechanism for the protection of all and the improvement of trade relations amongst all. Okay.
Magandang gabi po, Ginoong Pangulo. Mapunta lang po ako dito tatawid lang ko from Hong Kong, itatawid tayo ng ilog papuntang China. At medyo matagal na rin pong wala kaming nababalitaan ukol sa pakikipag-ugnayan ng Pilipinas sa China. Meron po bang ongoing na usapan kahit sa likod o sa harap ng gobyerno?
Parang may interest naman yata sa magkabilang panig na hindi lalo painitin ang issue. So parang conscious doon. Tayo naman ay ginawa na natin yung ating move sa arbitration. Sila naman ay may pananaw doon sa move natin yon. At conscious siguro ang bawat panig na hindi may gagawing aksyon na lalo pa magpapasama ng sitwasyon. Ngayon, ang magandang balita, di ba nagsalita tayo doon sa Cambodia, pinaalala natin na sa Cambodia mismo, sa Phnom Penh, noong 2002, nung sinubukan gumawa ng Code of Conduct, ang naging resulta yung DOC dahil hindi magkasundo sa Code of Conduct. So, 10 years later, hindi pa rin umuusad yung pag-uusap tungkol doon sa COC. Pero ngayon, nagkakaroon ng mga meetings tungkol doon sa pagbabalangkas at pagbubuo nga ng COC. At yun ang parang positive doon, no? Na parang naisantabi na 10 taon, ngayon medyo nasa forefront ng pag-iisip na lahat. Paano ba natin mapabilis pa yung pagkakamit ng matapos yung pagbabalangkas at mapagkasunduan yung COC? Hindi ko sinasabing malapit na. Hindi ko sinasabing magpipirmahan na tayo dyan sa Code of Conduct. Pero yung para makumbinsi lang lahat na pag-usapan na nga ulit to. At talagang pinag-uusapan naman, palagi ko mabante na yung ating solusyon para dito sa mga hidwaan tungkol sa pinagtatalunan mga isla at formation sa South China, West Philippine Sea.
Sa kabilang banda po, Ginoong Pangulo, yung tungkol sa framework agreement ng US at Pilipinas, ano na po ang update natin dito?
Sa MILF, no?
Hindi po, yung sa US.
Nilisip ko lang yung detalye. Siguro sa negotiation, parati tayo magkakatalian doon sa semantics, yung words that are actually used to convey the thoughts. Gusto ko sana i-discuss, no, yung parang sensitivities natin as a nation kung natuloy yung bisita ni President Obama. Nung tinawagan niya ako, sabi niya, kung meron raw akong dapat parating sa kanya, parating si Secretary Kerry at sabihin kay Secretary Kerry yung mga palagi ko dapat na malaman. So when Secretary comes to Manila, then we can discuss that in fullest terms and perhaps parang you agree on so many things But yung actual putting the exact words to indicate your meeting of the minds, we still have a little bit of work to do on that. So I think we'll get a better understanding by that time, things that we can do and things that they can do. And siyempre, kaibigan tayo, may give and take. Then hopefully we will come to that document that represents the meeting of the minds of both countries.
Sir, follow-up lang po. Aside dun sa discussion ng framework agreement, ano po yung expectations natin dun sa bisita ni Secretary Kerry?
Ayoko naman maging demanding sa bisita natin na lumagari kung saan-saan. No? Pero siyempre, magtatanong rin tayo ng prospects kailan matatapos yung issue ngayon sa Amerika. Magtatanong rin tayo na kanilang mga intentions elsewhere where we have an interest. For instance, sa Syria is hot on the topic. We still have citizens in Syria. We as an ally would want to know their intentions so that we can prepare our citizens for any eventuality. Yung other topics, baka pwede, banggitin ko na muna sa kanya bago natin i-broadcast. Kaysa naman sumagot rin siya sa akin sa interview.
Sir, pero dun po sa binubuong framework agreement, ano ho yung mga challenges na nakikita ninyo?
Again, do sa languages no? Their language is geared to support the request for budgets when they go to Congress. The language might be perfect in an American manner of speaking English, but might be construed differently from a Filipino mind. Yeah. So it's really the choice of words that will be used that satisfies both parties' needs and wants, and satisfies or addresses yung mga concerns or anxieties.
Sir, on another issue, nagkaroon ho ba kayo ng chance na magkaroon ng pag-uusap ni Prime Minister of Indonesia, Yudohon?
Si President SBO, busy siya
yeah.
dito. At hindi natuloy yung aming bilateral ni President Umala. No? Pero sa dami ng dialogue namin na informal at pull aside, parang tinalo pa namin yung bilateral. Doon nito, I invited him for a visit. He's been asking me, I think we really established a very deep relationship with them. Parehong pinagdaanan. No? Yung fight against communist insurgents, yung rightist government, yung emerging economy, yung addressing inclusiveness. So at the end of the day, when I was telling him, ito problema na sa Pilipinas, he said, you're describing Peru. No? So he was asking us, sabi niya, we want to improve our tourism. So pinakita ko sa kanya, it's more fun in the Philippines. Sabi niya, we do 3 million a year. Sabi ko, that's what we started out with, 3 million. But we're now between 5 and 6 million for this year. We're targeting 10. So, patapusin muna natin yun. No? At sa Indonesia naman, pati naman sa mga hayop nila, hindi tayo nagkakalayo. Sa halaman. No, but what's really interesting about President Umala was parang he had an interpreter present, no? And he wanted the interpreter to speak. He'd speak in Spanish and have the interpreter translate it into English. But that didn't stop him from really fostering a very good and deep communication and conversation with us throughout these past 2 days. No? Si Prime Minister O'Neill naman ng Papua New Guinea told me that there are between 25,000 to 30,000 Filipinos already in Papua New Guinea in various businesses, helping them out from finance to real estate to agriculture. Sabi na for them, very significant rin 25,000, 30,000 expatriates dahil mas maliit silang bansa sa atin. So again, we have somebody that who's already helping us in terms of our fishing industry, who's very friendly, and we want to cultivate this for the benefit of our people as well as their people.
Sir, we're interested if you got the chance to talk to Prime Minister Yudohon President of Indonesia. And napag-usapan ho ba yung nangyari sa Zamboanga and yung magiging fate or kinabukasan ng 1996 Peace Accord?
Nag-usap kami ni Prime Minister, ni President Widodo, plus si Minister na Tegalawa, no? At si Martin na Tegalawa ang mismo talaga involved do sa review process. Siyempre, number one, nagpasalamat tayo sa pagkatagal-tagal nilang pakikiisa sa atin sa paghahanap ng solusyon dito. At inulit rin sa atin na meeting yung OIC at gusto na sana ma-wrap up na yung review bago nung meeting ng OIC na yan. At inulit nila yung dedication nila to help us finish the review process, which is one of the things that was asked for by the OIC. Okay, now, yung kay Ms. Wari in particular, mas napag-usapan namin ng another head of state, no, who also has issues with him. Pero siyempre, si SBY is concentrated on APEC. And this was parang just one of the conversations we had in passing. Kakasabay. Siyempre, yung he told me that I've invited him to visit the Philippines. And he says probably by next year, magkakatugma na yung schedule. Again, no, they have been a very constant friend. I can even attest to the fact that Indonesia as a people, no, during my mother's time was helping us already address the issue with the MNLF. So imagine how many decades have passed and they're still here. They have gotten tired of helping us. And they've in fact reiterated their desire to continue helping us as far as that aspect is concerned. And on the side note, syempre, leaders na karoon kayo ng ugnayan. Sinabi ko lang kay President SBY, ngayon pa lang ang dami ng nagpo-posisyon na humalinin sa kanya. Sabi ko, siguro tribute na rin sa iyo to, na ang ganda ng performance mo, yung mamanahin hindi napakaraming problema. Siyempre, yung lahat sabi, magbi-build upon something na maganda na eh. As opposed to, bubuin mo yung sirang-sira. So, sinabi, parang in a way saying, thank you for what is done, which helped Indonesia, but also helped the entire region, amongst others.
Going back kay Mr. Lorbiswari, kumusta na po yung manhunt operation natin at kung sa tingin ba sa impormasyon nasa Pilipinas pa at kung kailan kayo siya pwedeng mapalutang?
Well, yung unang kinaso sa kanya muna yung violation of the international humanitarian law. No? Nireview rin yung testimony natin for rebellion and sedition. Niraid yung bahay na sinasabi nito si Fontanilla ay hindi raw bahay ni Miswari, pero pagkatagal-tagal na parang doon siya nakatira pag nasa Zamboanga City, may nahanap na mga pinagbabawal na bagay. Bubunutin sana yung telepono ko pero iniwan ko sa Maynila para precise sana. I think the new case will be illegal possession of explosives which is not bailable also. No? Anyway, si SOJ went to Zamboanga Friday, no, to personally follow up on the building up of the cases against Mr. Miswari. Our security forces are currently determining the exact position of Mr. Miswari. And once determined, then and once the warrant is in our possession, we will serve the warrant for the arrest of Mr. Miswari.
Sir, also, may leads na po ba tayo yung may pinalutang kasi na financier doon sa grupo ni Miswari at may binabanggit yung grupong Magdalo Party List na parang isang legislator yung sinasabing nagpundo doon?
Kung meron man tayong ganun dinidevelop na lead, no? Sasabihin na namin sa inyo pag may warrant of arrest na tayo. Pero ngayon pa lang na medyo hindi pa matibay, para sinabi na wala na naman. Sinabi na rin natin, may pagkakataon ko pa tumakas. Siyempre, kung pwede sana, natapos yung build-up ng kaso, punta tayo sa korte, sinangayunan, okay na yung preliminary investigation, nag-issue na warrant of arrest, madadala natin siya before the bars of justice. Yun ang target.
So hindi pa natin binibitawan yung angle yun na there is still that lead na merong ang nag-finance?
I'm not confirming that lead, just to be clear. What I know is that the people who were arrested said they were promised, either they were promised 10,000 pesos or they were given 10,000 pesos plus a rifle. So promise may rifle when you get to Zamboanga City, etc., in various positions. Now, may allegations say sub-commanders received substantial money, several millions each. So we are tracing that. One, we're trying to determine if it's true, and if it's true, under the stipulations in our laws, we're trying to find out who gave what to whom when. Then that person person or group will have to be asked to explain why did you give X amount.
Thank you, sir.
Marami pong mga spekulasyon tungkol dun sa anunsyo ni LTO Chief Torres na magre-retiro na siya. Ang sinasabi po kasi ng iba dahil dun sa mga kontrobersiya na ibinabato sa kanya baka raw po kayo mismo yung nagpa-retire or humiling sa kanya na bumitaw na siya sa kanyang pwesto.
Well, nag-usap kami, no? At syempre, last issue niya, niliwanag ko, kababayan ko naman siya. Sabi ko, parang hindi ko naman yata kailangan itong parang paliwanag pa. At naintindihan naman niya, no? Na ito na yung better route, no? Less stress for her, less stress for her family, at saka baka better for the agency na it attends to everything it has to attend to. Rather than, di ba, maski pa paano madadivert yung focus at yung attention. So, I don't think I forced her, no? Told her parang the lay of the land, quoted certain things, no? And she agreed with the end point, no?
Sir, was it a hard decision for you? Kasi kaibigan niyo naman siya talaga, di ba?
Yung on the basis of the last incident, no? Parang that was very clear. Ngayon, yung mas matanda siya sa akin, babae siya, ayaw mo namang yung bibigyan siya ng payo na mabigat na, lalo pang pahirapan. Huwag naman sana salt in being rubbed in an injury. Bigyan naman natin dignidad ng tao dahil talaga namang ako hindi ako naniniwala, for instance, sa mga binabati ko sa kanya na dito sa mga kontrobersya nung umpisa na may pinapaborang ganito at ganyan, may katiwalian. Hindi ko makita ng gagawin niya yun o kaya man niyang gawin yun. Although, sabi ko, parang dito, baka may error ka ng judgment in that last incident. And, di ba, is that still a necessary activity for me to get into yung defense of something like that?
May we know, sir, kung meron na pong naiisip kayo na ipapalit sa kanya?
I think I left that up to the Secretary of Transportation and Communications.
Sir, isa pa pong issue yung sa extortion na allegation dun sa ibang DOTC officials. Ano na pong plano ninyo kay Sir Al Vitangcol? Kasi isa siya sa mga pinangalanan po.
Ay, hinihintay natin yung investigation ng NBI. No? At the end of the day, they will sift through the allegations, the various defenses, and come up with their findings. And I'm still waiting that. Ngayon, ang problema lang NBI nag-imbestiga dito, nag-imbestiga sa Zamboanga, ang dami iniimbestigahan na polis. Mamili ka na ng, di ba parang issue, sila natatask. Then there are other agencies that we are tasking.
In the meantime, sir, hindi po ba kaya dapat na mag-leave na lang muna siya ulit or suspindihin muna?
I'm not
pending
exactly sure what
investigation?
his status was. The last I heard was he was on leave.
Nakabalik na po siya, sir.
That last time kasi na sinabi sa akin ni SOTC, he was verifying whether or not nag-lapse na yung time frame ng leave.
Sir, last na lang po. May plano pa po ba kayong i-appoint si Senador Ping Lacson tsaka si Kiko Pangilinan?
Si Kiko, I talked to him. I don't know if I can reveal what we talked about. But this was before yung kailan ko pa siya nakasap? Medyo mahaba. Probably about a month and a half ago. And I was asking him if he was ready to accept a position, and just to make sure. Because somebody told me that he needed to spend quality time with his family. No. And sabi ko, ganun. Parang liwaliwanag na usapan namin na after he finishes his term. So I talked to him and he said he really needs quality time with his family. Sabi ko, sige, then you tell me when you're available. No. But this was before any controversy, no? Kaya siguro, ayaw ko, parang, kailangan ko siguro,
Sir, baka ayaw niya, sir, yung inaalok niyo.
no, he was actually talking about certain functions, DA in particular, that he wanted. At siguro parang nahihiya siya, no, after having so many meetings discussing exactly where he feels he can fit in. Biglang meron sila needs in the family. He has 2 children na quite young. Siguro nasabihan silang, daddy niyo hindi na masyadong busy, will not be running, no, will be attending to this and to that. Nakita ko rin naman nung nagsalita ako doon sa eskwelahan ng panganay na kung gaano ka-involved si Kiko doon sa pagpaparal doon sa bata. At aminin ko, pati rin naman ako kung nag-iisip rin ako ng time na tapos na ako sa trabaho ko. No? So yung tao naman has served the senator for 2 terms directly. No? That's 12 years. I accepted in face value what he said. Kay Senator Lacson naman, we're still ironing out the details. No? Exactly what the scope of his functions are. Para walang overlap. Para walang violation of any existing law. We just want to make sure. So the Executive Secretary is still studying the proposed executive order.